Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Overflow. My name is Micah Curtis.
And I'm Alex Baldwin, and good God, apparently I've owned somebody on Twitter.
Yes. So, before we even get started on that, you'll notice that my camera's at a different angle than usual. The reason being is that I have reoriented my desk, mostly because this way you can see the gunpla behind me a little bit better. But also, I now have it to where the monitor that my camera is sitting on is one of three, obviously, that I have on my desk. Well, I switched them all around so that if I bought an HD switch or an HDMI switcher, so if I press one button, suddenly the monitor that goes to my laptop, the second monitor, becomes the third monitor on the gaming computer. And then I can do what's called NVIDIA Surround, which is basically like 3 monitor gaming, which is fucking cool. So, trust me when I tell you, Doom Eternal with peripheral vision is a mind trip. So, it takes getting used to. It'll make you a little seasick at first,
The
but
future is now.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So so Hatman, Michael Malice, Michael
I
Malice
don't
made us
even,
stupid, and you definitely caught him on it.
I don't even know the dude. Like some folks in the Discord were saying like, oh, he's being an insufferable asshat. Must be a day ending in Y. And I'm like, I don't recognize this dude at all. I just thought he said something incredibly stupid on Twitter, and it basically amounted to no, Dan Crenshaw is not allowed to express his disdain for the idea of pulling troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq because he's a warmonger. And I'm like, look, I disagree with his take, but you can't just say this is a black and white issue. Like his views deserve to be discussed and respected like anyone else's. Like to say otherwise is basically falling into this leftist dribble of you're not allowed to have certain opinions.
Yeah,
And his response to that was, anything preceding a but in a political stance can be disregarded. To which my response is, I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it can be thrown out, I guess.
yeah, that was very well played, I thought.
Well,
So Michael Malice, like he's done like some documentary work on North Korea and stuff like that that was really good. But he is kind of
mhm.
an insufferable ass because he's very pretentious. I remember watching the Joe Rogan show or the Joe Rogan podcast with him on it the first time I think he was on it. And he was talking about North Korea and all this other stuff. And then he starts going on this tirade about how democracy is a failed system. And I'm like,
You
okay, so
fucking
so
kidding
wait a minute,
me?
wait a minute, wait a minute. You went over to the most communist of communist countries and saw what was there, where there is no democracy, where there is no voice of the people, like the people have zero voice, and you want to do away with one of the systems that is best for making sure the citizen has a voice. You are retarded, sir. Pretentious and retarded.
I was about to say you're not supposed to drink the Kool-Aid when you go to North Korea.
Yeah. So, needless to say, I thought that was very well done. So I figured it was worth
I
bringing up.
tried.
The
I try my best.
Twitter has been definitely been goofy, especially in regards to the Crenshaw thing. And
Hmm.
I'll just say this: I don't agree with Crenshaw, but I can see the perspective.
Hmm.
And if you can't see the perspective, you like there's a your pacifism, I think, is or your non-interventionism is getting the better of your sense because
Hmm.
there is arguments to be made for deterrence. That's why we still have
Hmm.
nukes.
Naturally.
So that is something that has to be considered whenever it comes to pulling any number of troops out of any given area. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I've seen a pretty crazy argument. This is like the destabilization that's offered by U.S. interventionism is actually more stable than what would happen to the Middle East if the U.S. pulled out entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really weird argument because it's like, well, it's going to be destabilized anyway. We're just offering a little bit more control. Like, I get it, but at the same time, like, maybe it's best to just let them handle their own shit. So, no, I disagree with Crenshaw's take that we shouldn't pull out any troops at all. I do think a reduction in force is necessary for what effectively amounts to 20 years of wasted money and unnecessary loss of life. But dear God, trying to play this like it's a black and white issue of either get out or you're terrible and you support endless war is nonsensical.
Yeah. And that's one thing I've always hated about the endless wars, even that talk. And by the way, I've lost friends to the war on terror. And I think that the discussion needs to be sensible. Because if you let emotion, take over, decisions that would be made on a governmental level could waste even more life if you really believe life is being wasted. So you have to, that's all the more important as to or why rationale is all the more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people don't seem to realize that.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it is a cost benefit analysis at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you can argue for and against, and debates can be had, etc., etc. But yeah, trying to shut down debate is something that I can't support.
Yeah, I mean, that's a leftist talking point. That's been one for like the last half decade.
Yeah,
that we've seen in popular culture. So, no, I'm absolutely going to call that out, regardless of who's spouting it.
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer in the marketplace of ideas.
Exactly. Before we move into the questions, I'm just going to say that the attempt to shout someone down or the attempt to make something black and white and slander someone's ideas as an ist or an ism is a fear of the argument.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right, let's move on to the questions for the week.
Yep, get into the fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. So let's get started. Hatman, as always, I'll let you pick. What are we starting with, politics or entertainment?
Let's just go straight into politics since we're kind of there already.
Okay. Melee Brawler 64 wants to know if we've ever heard of bit gender. No, and I don't care to know.
So I hadn't, and I looked it up, and someone literally just made it on Twitter back in August. And the description is a desire to be or act robotic, a connection with robotics and tech, and hope for the future and love for others. It
so you want to be Wally then?
It makes no fucking sense. This is it's so dumb. I hate this xenogender nonsense. And yes, that's actually what it's called. So the suffer not the xenos to live is fully applicable here.
Yeah, I'm fully of the camp after you said that to declare it not a thing. Shall we declare it not a thing?
I would declare bitgender not a thing.
There we go. Bitgender is not a thing. So if anybody tells you it is a thing, tell them it is not a thing. And to grow up and get a life.
Reminds me of nanogender. That was literally somebody made up nanogender to troll these trenders.
Mm-hmm.
They took it and ran with it.
Of course they
did. And then when he exposed the con, they said, "No, actually, it's a real thing, and we're taking it from you." It's nonsense.
Speaking of silly, Miguel Barrera wants to know thoughts on the new xenogender called, get this, lollygender. That is not a thing either. We're declaring that not a thing right now. I don't even want to look it up. I don't want to. I don't want my brain cells to die even further. I don't have that many left.
No. The the Mew xenogender too. I've seen that one a lot more too. The Mew and pup gender, which makes even less sense to me because furry is not a gender. You absolute
Furry is an
morons.
abomination upon
Furry is not
mankind.
a gender. As we used to say back in the times of my old internet, yif in hell.
Yes, agreed.
And I know we have a couple of furries in our audience too.
Yeah, if you wanna fuck somebody while you're wearing a fursuit, you need to go to therapy. Like
I mean,
seriously,
like
it's just not
I
normal.
don't care. I don't care what you decide to do in the bedroom. Your kinks are your kinks, but
Yeah, just don't bring them
when
up around us.
when you go as far as to persona is one thing, making it so much your identity to the point where like your pronouns have to conform to it is it goes beyond wish fulfillment into full on delusion.
Yeah,
Like, sorry, but no, just no. And I like to think the furries in our audience have much more sense than those assholes.
hopefully. All right. An angry green boss says if Trump runs again, he says here in 22204. That's so. I guess we're going to put Trump in stasis for 20,000 years.
He really is the God Emperor.
But in 2024, could Trump still bring his energy and support against Biden by then? I don't know. We don't even know if his support and energy even worked with this one.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to find out. And I think that a 4-year gap might not have might actually be less favorable.
yeah,
Because here's the thing. Like I said, we don't know the results of the election. It's gonna be a mess talking about it on Friday because just today we saw 2 election officials in Detroit get basically were threatened with doxing and harassment of their children.
Oh no, they didn't get threatened. They got doxxed, and their children were threatened.
Oh,
And
that's right. Yeah,
one of the other council members probably was involved.
yeah. And there needs to be a criminal investigation of that.
Oh yeah, it's
That's
sick.
there's already discussion on Twitter about a demonstration outside the guy who made the threat, the representative elect outside of his house,
Hmm. That's
and
a bad idea too.
that is a bad idea too. But governments should be afraid of their people.
Yes,
And when this
but
guy is brazenly threatening the families of people who, are just doing their job, and you're in government, you need to, that's people need to demonstrate. That's where I believe protest has a place.
yeah,
Because a crowd should show up around this government representative's house and say, "Look, we elected you. We do not approve of this. You are our employee as of the people. You have to listen to us. And if we say
right.
you do not threaten somebody in this community, you don't do it, or we're coming back."
See, my concern is that it's at the dude's house. Like I can understand if it's at the wherever the city council meets, be it the whatever. But going to a private residence in my mind makes you no better than the people who would dox the other guys. Like that's not going to get the message of we disapprove of what you're doing and you need to be held accountable to it across. That's going to look to the average watcher, and of course is going to be spun in the press as right-wing harassment,
Yeah.
bullying tactics.
I suppose you're
And
right. I'll
it's
admit I'm a little fired up
yeah.
about it
I mean, I
because
I totally understand.
yeah,
I totally fucking
that's
get it.
evil.
It is. It absolutely. And I get it from a, you deserve a taste of your own medicine sort of approach, but at the same time it's going to look a whole hell of a lot different if, Republicans are doing it as opposed to Republicans receiving it.
Yeah. Either way,
It's
I
just
do think
it's
that
just how it is.
I do think that people need to call the police en
Oh yeah,
masse and complain about it.
yeah, yeah. This dude definitely deserves to be held accountable, taken to task for it,
Yeah.
for sure, because that is ridiculous.
But anyway, on the Trump thing, so we're not gonna know if that energy and base really was even indicative of anything,
Yeah.
because and this is something that we need to keep in mind. If Donald Trump lost the election legitimately, if he indeed was not reelected for a second term, what does that mean for everything that happened during the course of the election cycle? What it tells you is that rally crowds are indicative of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That how energized your base set and how much they say MAGA 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 on Twitter is indicative of nothing. Stuff like that. Like there's a lot to take in there. And basically what it means is that every election is going to be even more hard to call as time goes on, just because we're not going to really know what any indicator is as to who the next president's going to be. Mm-hmm. It's going to be just a toss up, every single time, because there were people that were predicting like a landslide for Trump, and then look what happened, and
well, to be fair too, there were people predicting a landslide for Biden.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, what was it, 538 predicted that he would be up by like over 200 electoral votes.
Yeah.
That patently ridiculous.
Absolutely.
The polls got some things right, like Georgia apparently flipping.
Yeah.
But they got other things wrong, like North Carolina flipping, like Texas flipping, like all that shit.
Yeah. I mean, polls at this point have a 10% margin of error.
Yeah, that
10
is
fucking
preposterous.
percent. That's huge.
You may as well throw that out. Like anyone who's taken a statistics class can tell you that that is not a reliable source of information.
No, it's not. So, but on the conservative end, on the Trump end, am I to think that in 4 years his base would still be as fired up? No, I really don't think that they would. I think that people will move on. Because again, if Trump loses, what the one thing we have to keep in mind is this, is that the concept of Trumpism, the concept of that sort of braggadocious bravado that only Donald Trump can pull off, and everybody else trying to be that for 4 years, that people are just sick of it. In which case, there's a lot of people out there that I know that are conservatives who have been trying Trump impersonations for the last 4 years, gonna have to eat some fucking crow. But beyond that, what we have to understand is that this election was a commentary on whether or not Donald Trump was a commentary on Donald Trump as a candidate. That's just it. And we'll really realize if he really was that good of a candidate to run against, an average Democrat, which is what Joe Biden really is. Mm-hmm. He's very average. He's a big government corporatist.
I don't know if it's so much a referendum on him versus your run-of-the-mill Democrat as much as it is just a referendum on 4 years of a election cycle. I mean, you've had people that were fired up to vote against Trump from election day 2016.
Yeah.
They were and of course, they tried to find every possible way to get him out of office. I mean, 4 years of an ongoing smear campaign on social media and through mainstream sources. Politics became the center of American culture for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't go anywhere, it seems, without finding politics injected somewhere. I mean, for God's sake, when we have video game console reviews that talk about the election in them, that's saying something.
Yeah.
That's absolutely absurd. So I don't know if it's so much about whether or not he's a good candidate as much as it is whether or not he's just a likable person, a good enough person, whether or not his policy accomplishments were enough to dissuade people from voting against him who may think he's, too much of an asshole to be worth their vote. I do think it came down to character more than anything else. And in that regard, I don't know if that would be enough to propel Trump through a 2024 run. And of course, he would have to maintain his base throughout that period too. And the rumors that he's going to be founding his own media company or buying out Newsmax or something, that could help in the short term, but we don't know for sure if there's going to be any kind of long-term gains from that. Whether or
Culture's
not
got to
he's
change
going to,
first.
well, yeah, of course,
That's
and
the
he's
I did an article on that for RT recently. It's like,
yeah
conservatives are always thinking news, 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 news. The left does not think news, 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 news. They think of
no
news. Don't get me wrong, but they also think about what makes news. They think of
yeah
the culture constantly.
yeah
It's constantly on their minds. That's why everything was politics, is because they
yeah.
knew that it would affect the culture.
Well, yeah, culture in turn drives news.
Yeah,
I mean, for God's sake, that's why TMZ still breaks stories.
yeah. So when
But
it comes right down to it, and I mean, getting involved in that is just not gonna do anything.
yeah
The culture has to change. The things that Donald Trump was pro, pro America, pro patriotism, pro Constitution, so on and so forth. Those pro traditional masculinity and all this other stuff, these things that are good. Mm-hmm. There needs to be pushback against the culture that is basically trying to erase these things.
yeah
And you cannot rely on Donald Trump to do it. Put not your faith in man
no
alone. Jesus, like you need to, and just don't rely on other people for it. You gotta
spread the word
step up and do
yourselves.
something. Yeah,
Yeah
because like this shit is just not going to work. You just can't rely on politicians that are downstream from the culture and constantly being reactive. You have to be proactive in this shit. And that's what's going to win elections in the future. Is the culture is going to have to change, and people are going to have to, make an effect on it in the micro and the macro.
Yeah.
So,
I think that also sort of ties into the factor of normalcy, quote unquote, since Trump's presidency has been rather abnormal compared to what we've seen over the last God knows how fucking long, probably since Reagan. Whether or not people appreciate a return to the norm in that regard. And I think culture does tie into that because, there has been a sort of shift in our expectations of politicians, and certainly through through social media. Who was it who said Democrats need to learn to govern and stop trying to be social media famous? Hakeem Jeffries, I think was his name.
yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. I don't really know if I feel comfortable making any predictions right now. Everything is just so damn uncertain.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? All right. On to entertainment. Angry Green Boss
Let's get to
wants
fun
to know.
stuff.
Yeah. You might be sick of these kind of questions. How would you write a father-daughter relationship? Stay tuned. That's all I'm going to say. Part of the plans for next year. So, and I'm not spoiling it.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's good. Hatman's read it. Okay. Um, Nick White wants to know thoughts on Halo Infinite's recent troubles. What are the recent troubles with it?
Um, that they brought back Joseph Staten, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to be the head of the whole project.
Yeah.
So that kind of implies that the delay is going to be longer than anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there was some stuff about, wanting greater transparency throughout the development process, which again also implies that this is going to be a longer delay than anticipated. Um, so most of it is just rumor and speculation right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the word on the street is that they are very worried that it's not going well and are trying to mitigate as much of the damage as possible without having to scrap it and start over again. Because the game has been in development for so fucking long.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder if this was all just inevitable anyway, given the direction that 343 was taking Halo after Halo, well, during Halo 4, really. Let's be real. Even though I still like Halo 4, I will still defend that game to death. I think the narrative is one of the better ones in the series. But Halo 5 was just straight garbage.
Mm-hmm.
It was a dumpster fire. There is no excuse for disregarding the story beats and the setup that Halo 4 offered. It was, we're going to have a more personal story. You're going to find out more about the Master Chief. You only play as him for 3 levels of the fucking campaign. Yeah, okay. That's really fucking wonderful. So I do think this was inevitable that they were going to have to go back to the drawing board and ultimately fall back into what was familiar for Halo. And we'll see if they can pull it off. I mean, if they're bringing some OG Bungie folks back, they're really in trouble. So, yeah, I'm concerned, but we'll see.
I'll definitely say that the footage that was shown and like the screenshots and stuff were very concerning. It did not look up to par.
Well, I'm okay with it, honestly. I don't mind the art style as much as some people do. For me, Halo has always been more about the story than anything else. And if they can't get that right, then I have no more interest in the franchise.
Well, my issue is the lack of detail.
Mm.
Like they showed this image of like a brute getting
Oh
elbowed in
yeah,
the
the
face.
famous one.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's just looking like it's you know
yeah,
brain dead. Like
yeah,
that's not a good sign.
yeah. And the excuses that came out that, oh, it was a alpha build or pre-alpha build that they showed off, that it looks better right now, compared to what they had submitted for,
Right, but if you don't
the
have straight
showcase.
facial animations in alpha, you've got
Yeah.
problems.
Well, that, and also if it's looking like that to the point where you really have to go on full damage control and you're a few months out from launch, no fucking shit people are going to be concerned,
Yeah.
to say the very least. So yeah, delaying it, I hope is going to pay off, because I hope we get a good Halo game again out of it. But I swear to God, man, if this ends up being another Halo 5 disaster, I might check out from the franchise. I really hate to say that, but I might actually check out.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Melee Brawler says, "What is a game you would like to see remade for current gen console slash PC?"
Legend of Dragoon,
Legacy of Kain.
that's a good one too.
Yeah, the original Legacy of Kain, I think, would be a really good pick.
Yeah, I want to see a Legend of Dragoon remake, because it seems like it seems like the rumor mill always says they're going to do a remake or an HD version or whatever, and then it just
Never.
never happens.
Yeah.
Never ever. And Dart was supposed to be in freaking PlayStation All Stars, but he got shit canned at like the last minute, which really makes me upset because that would have definitely put more eyes on that freaking game. But if they can remake Final Fantasy VII, then there's still hope yet.
Well, I don't really know if there's nearly as much demand though.
Oh, certainly not, but
Say one ever since like voices have been in RPGs like constantly, which I would say like it was a more consistent thing at the end of the PlayStation 1, beginning of the PlayStation 2 era. Um Actually no, not even Dark Cloud had much voice acting if at all. So I would say like as long as there's like all the way back to FF10, people have been demanding a remake of FF7, you know. And it was already the most popular Final Fantasy of all time. So I don't know if Dragoon really commands that same sort of thing. But then again, you know, I don't think the original Legacy of Kain does either. You know, but I would still like to see it done because the original Legacy of Kain was like a top-down RPG. I'd like to see it redone, bring back Simon Templeman to voice the character. You know, modern, beautiful HD graphics, etc. You know, and kind of have it formatted as an action RPG would be really fucking cool. So, or I would almost say like redo the whole thing because the controls in the old Legacy of Kain games have not aged well. So, story's always great. Best voice acting you'll ever find in video games, bar none. But
you could probably even get what's her name to work on it again.
Oh, Amy Hennig?
Amy Hennig to work on it again since she's not at Naughty Dog anymore.
Yeah. Crystal Hydra wants to know, they say that Batman can solve any problem if given enough time. So I ask you, can Batman stop a Tyranid invasion without the aid of a god-level character? Yes. It's called the Green Lantern Corps.
So no Superman, basically.
I was about to say, like, that's like most superhero. Well, I guess they means like an omnipotent deity.
Okay.
Given the amount
so I was going
to
say, if he's got Superman on his side, then
about to say, well, no,
nope,
like not even that. The Green Lantern Corps.
Well, them too.
Like, what the fuck are the Tyranids gonna do to the Green Lantern Corps? I mean, like, Hal Jordan alone would be able to carve through anything that the Tyranids throw at him. They just don't have that kind of raw power. They have numbers, but there's ways to curve those numbers, you know? So, yes, I do think he could plan for it.
Yeah. But that's, again, Batman would need manpower for it. If it was just Batman and the Bat family alone...
Oh, yeah, then he's dead.
Probably not. Any kind of, like, planetary level threat, yes, he's got to call in backup. At the very least, the Justice League. And of course, if he's calling in Hal or John Stewart, then they're going to call in the rest of the Corps. So,
Eclectic 1995 gives us our last question. Says, when it comes to writing good poetry, what would you recommend to help and improve oneself in this kind of writing? Somebody's got a girlfriend. No, I'm kidding. Poetry. God, I haven't read poetry in a long fucking time.
This might actually be my sort of area of expertise. Even though I was never any good at poetry. But the first bit of advice that I was ever given in my college level poetry class was forget everything that you ever knew about poetry. Or at least everything you thought you knew about poetry. Because poetry is writing without rules. At the end of the day, there are no restraints on what you put together. So you can style it however you want. You can go without style. You can literally put a single word on every page and make like a 200-page poem put out that way. no limits whatsoever. And depending on what kind of a person you are, that could either be really encouraging or really intimidating. For me, it's really intimidating because I do like having some barriers, some guidelines. And what I wrote, sometimes there were rhyme schemes, sometimes there was alliteration. I tried to have a little bit more of a decent flow to it, as opposed to just, random words thrown together, ideas, whatever. I tried to make everything have a logical flow, be it through ideas or some connection through wordplay, what have you. And I had some successes, mostly failures with it, uh, according to the opinions of others, of course. And I wasn't really satisfied, but then again, I'm not satisfied with most of the poetry that I write because I hate poetry. I generally do not like it. Um, I don't know if that really helps at all, but that's that's what they told me. Forget everything you thought you knew about it because poetry is writing without limits.
Interesting. So, I used to really like writing poetry back when I was younger. Did it quite a bit because I believed that poetry was as pure of an expression of a soul that you were ever going to find.
I've heard that too.
So this is going to be me getting a little flowery, but that was sort of like my journal, whenever I was in high school. A lot of it was poetry that I would write. And one thing that I will say that I really liked about poetry back then is because I set a strict rule for myself on I always had to make it rhyme. I learned a lot of words. My vocabulary expanded. And that was nice. The my guideline for poetry is very simple. Write what's on your heart and make it rhyme. You follow those two standard rules. Might not be the best thing ever, but you're getting what you need to be off your chest. Poetry, when it comes to writing, is the best therapeutic writing, in my opinion. Well, that and prose.
I think that's the reason why angsty poetry tends to be really popular.
Oh yeah. Whenever and one thing that you'll also notice with me is every once in a while you'll actually catch me when I'm talking with someone else. I'll actually rhyme 3 words or 3 sentences in a row. That's because I did so much poetry as a teenager. But so as somebody who's good at it, the one thing that I just always encourage people whenever they're writing it, because I couldn't break it down and like write a book on it, because again it's hard for me to tell people how to write.
Yeah.
Because I am kind of a virtuoso at it. I couldn't explain to you how it's good. I just know that when people read it, they like it. So I've had people like, I think even Hatman has asked me, how did you do this? I'm like, I don't know. I just did it. But it's another type of storytelling. It's another type of expression. It's a different way and it's a very, very pure and kind of flowery way of doing things because of how expressive it can be on your emotional state. So what I would recommend doing is just practice,
Yeah.
and also read poets, I am a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I also really like reading Henry David Thoreau as well. Walden, one of my favorite books ever. So little things like that are kind of what I would recommend to do. But the big thing is just don't hold back, because if you let it out, it will feel very pure. Another thing you can do is also listen to old songwriters from back in the 60s, 70s. Cat Stevens. Why am I forgetting his name? Did Country Roads. John Denver. Stuff like that. Jim Croce. Johnny Cash. Those are poets. They just know how to sing too.
Well, even freaking Tupac, he wrote poetry.
Yeah, but it's rap. I'm not gonna recommend rap.
And that's the thing. Early rap was effectively just spoken word poetry, and
True.
that's a big difference between what we've got now and what was happening then. I guess also something I could recommend is don't get intimidated when you read, the famous poets like T.S. Eliot, of course. Don't get intimidated because you don't understand what the fuck they're trying to say, or what kind of style they're putting down. Just use it to get ideas about what you're going to do, and use it for vocabulary lessons too. You can learn new words that way.
Exactly.
But yeah, of course, if you ever want to improve writing of any sort, write every single day. Or if you would prefer the crazy writer route, and by crazy writer I mean Hemingway route, write drunk, edit sober. Mixed results with that.
For the sake of your liver, though, I'm not going to recommend that.
Yeah. Like I said, crazy writer route.
Yeah.
And a reminder, too, that it did not end well for Hemingway.
No, it did not.
It did not. Alcoholism is not fun, y'all.
No, it's a big negative bueno. All right, folks, that was the last question.
And that's it.
That is it. We've done so many
no overflow this
overfloods.
time.
We're kind of used to having
know,
more
right?
questions than you even know what to do with.
Seriously.
So, before we take off, do not forget that, of course, we still have the promotion going on, and oh goodness, the thing goofed. We still have the promotion going on with PureVPN. If you do not have a current VPN provider, please consider getting them. They have a special going on that is, you can click the link in the description to get. And then, of course, 3 Nights, 4 Days is still live on Indiegogo. It is our one active campaign we have right now. You're going to want to get in on it soon, because we're going to be shipping out the posters for that very soon. And though we will overprint, I don't know how many we're going to overprint for. So I would get your order in quick before we start, ordering those prints. So something as a heads up. Hatman, any final words before we take off?
I believe my food just got here, so I'm going to go eat some ribs.
Delicious. All right, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, podcast is Friday. But until then, my name is Micah Curtis.
And I'm Alex Baldwin, and I'm going to satisfy my hunger.
Yes, he is. We will see you guys soon. Dave's Vault.
Dave's Vault.